All right, so in this video, we'll learn a little bit about what Shashwat does day to day as a software engineer at Google. So I'm curious, Shashwat, what's a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so for some context, right now I'm technical lead for a project at Google. So just keep that in mind and I'll relate how my day goes. So as in my role, your responsibilities include, setting direction for a team, making sure you execute on things that are impactful, while you're yourself contributing to the product in some tangible way. So you're the person who's responsible for, major engineering decisions and trade-offs and so on. So my day kind of looks like, okay, start off with, I guess before work begins. Do you want to talk about before work begins?
Yeah, sure. Tell me before work begins. What's your prep routine?
Oh God, yeah, I need my coffee. I need my coffee and I need like a few minutes just not doing work, a few minutes to kind of detach from everything. And you do get time for it. My people are very reasonable with when their meetings begin and so on. So for 10 minutes, you might find me just sitting on my couch doing nothing at all. If you were to look at me, you would think, I guess you would think this person is.
We've got the morning Shashwat is frozen until his
Yep.
coffee starts to kick in. And
Mhm.
then he starts to animate and wake up.
Yeah, yeah. I call that clearing my head, but it's really me being, I guess, vegetating for a little bit.
Maybe some of
But
both.
a little bit of both. Yeah. So, after my morning rituals, the first thing I do like to do is uh, to get a sense of what my day is going to look like. So to do that, I first create a plan for each day, a quick uh, list of like 4 or 5 short things I want to accomplish. And this is like in a very rudimentary spreadsheet, so nothing too elaborate. And then check my emails to see what else needs to be added or taken off the list. So this takes me maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes in the morning, getting through all of this. And then you begin thinking of, okay, what is my team doing? What is each project that everybody's working on? Are there any issues that need to be resolved? Like, is there anything that I need to help with besides my own things? Is there anything that I can ease for people in my team? Because that is priority number one. Like in this role, your priority is to make sure people around you are able to like progress and move fast. So this is what I do. And then, if there's something that's required, like we probably have an impromptu meeting between me and the person, discuss anything that's needed. So this might take like 30 minutes, depends on the day. But eventually you do have 2 or 3 meetings in the morning, especially, as a technical lead, this is part of your role, right? Like talking to your team, talking to people from other teams to make sure that the collaboration is going smoothly, to make sure that what you're doing is something that people want. So uh, you end up having, like maybe 2 or 3 of these in a day on average. And this might be scattered throughout the day. So I can't tell you that I keep my mornings for meetings and I save my evenings. It's quite arbitrary. Yep. So I do get chunks of time. I like to at least have 1 hour blocks of time that I keep for myself. So in each block of time, like I have something of my own that I'm working on, either designing, engineering parts for a new project, or implementing a solution for an existing project. And at this point, since my time is spread between me and other people, it's you really have to be choosy about what you work on individually. So you cannot work on something that you would have been able to work on, like, as an entry-level engineer, you don't have that kind of time to just focus on heads down work. So I do that in my, like hour-long blocks. I mean, maybe like 2 or 3 of these a day. So morning, and then you pass whatever meetings that you had. There's lunch, and afternoon, maybe 2 meetings that were remaining through the day. and an hour or two to finish up on whatever you needed to deliver. So by the end of the day, I'm going back and checking off things on my to-do list from the morning, carrying stuff over to the next day. But I try to make sure that I have checked off at least the most important thing for the day, if not everything. So typically the day ends maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then you keep your laptop away and you don't need to look at it again. Because I guess for a lot of people, the day doesn't quite end when work ends. The day continues, and you're expecting things to come up. But for me, that's not the case. So I can detach from work once I'm done.
Nice. Well, and so it sounds like then because you're intentional about prioritizing and have a good handle on where things are, the need to work on night or weekends is not as prevalent because there's sort of that, okay, I've got this, I know what I need to do, and you take care of that during the day.
Yeah, that's a large part of it. There is another part which is, I guess, like out of your control, depending on what kind of project you're working on. Some of them might need babysitting, and some of them might need you to be on hand to fix anything that comes up. So I'm not in that position yet, but yeah, being intentional is definitely a requirement.
Yeah. It also sounds like you have a balance of this, heads down engineering time and the heads up in meetings. What's the typical skew between those two? How does your week break up in terms of meeting time versus coding time?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the time of the year,
Mm.
right? Like, so you know this, right? You know how we do quarterly planning, and you know how things get. You plan for the quarter like a month into the quarter itself, so things spill over, and those 3 or 4 weeks often get a little bit crazy. So during that time, heads down work is really quite limited. So in the last 1 or 2 weeks of the quarter and the first 2 weeks of the quarter, you are mostly focused on planning, mostly focused on, are we solving the right problem? So I would say in that situation, my heads down time is probably like 30% of my total time. But like when things settle, once you have the comfort of knowing that your team is occupied with doing productive things, that's when you kind of like ease off on that a little bit, ease off on heads up work. And then in the steady state, I would say it's 50-50 for me. 50-50, sometimes 60-40 between heads up and heads down.
Yeah. And so it sounds like there is that sort of ebb and flow depending on when in the quarter you are. And maybe if there's some projects that need things, they tip that towards heads down. I'm curious, as you're describing it, a lot of aspects of your role sound like a people manager. How does the tech lead and people management, responsibility or role square?
That's a great question, Tory. And I wish I had the complete answer for you. I think nobody quite knows what the demarcation is between the two. So
Okay.
I'll tell you what my opinion is. So I, as a technical lead and not a people manager, I do not have career conversations. I mean, you do think of your career, but and that's how you decide what projects would be good for what person. But that's not something that I am ultimately responsible for. And I also, on a day-to-day basis, we talk more about work and how projects are going and so on. Of course, we do talk about other things, but again, like you don't feel responsible for it as technically. You are required to be kind of like in the weeds as needed and help people out in, I guess, mostly in the technical details of the projects. As a people manager, sometimes the difference is, okay, the technical details are clear, but there are organizational hurdles that need to be cleared to get the project going. And that's when you escalate, and that's when your manager can help you out. And the manager also plays a bigger role in like mapping out your trajectory, and then he can influence the technical lead to okay, this person, it would make sense for this person to work on a project of this scope or this size of this nature. And that's how you kind of collaborate.
Huh.
And the people manager might, oh sorry,
No, go ahead.
yeah, the people manager might like rely on the technical lead for getting into the technical details, right? And you're the kind of the right hand man, so he can focus on the well-being of the team more.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you're almost responsible for the engineering excellence and the quality of what the team is producing, making sure that folks are deployed and that things are getting done. But when it comes to people's long-term path and compensation and those sort of pieces, they're less your focus so that you can focus on actually making sure the engineering work is good.
Great summary. Yep.
Nice. Oh, and what a great opportunity. I'm curious, one of the things you had mentioned in talking about your path was how much you love, the computer and the rapport there. What's it like spending that much time in the sort of heads up, advising others and maybe not as getting as much heads down time as you did in the
Oh,
past?
let me tell you, Tory, like it's evolved so much over the years. Like, so I've been at Google for 6 years at this point. I was January was my 6th year. So the first year that I was at Google, like every meeting on my calendar would, okay, I would panic. Not full blown panic, but you'll be like, okay, who is this person and what do they want from me? And this would happen even in one-on-ones with manager because you don't quite know what is expected of you at that point, and you don't quite know like how the dynamics between you and other people in the organization work. So honestly, at that point, yes, I was a little bit anxious generally and largely preferred heads down work. But then over time, I think it becomes a necessity. You realize, or at least I realized from stumbling. So concretely, there's projects that I worked on where I've decided to focus more on heads down, on being heads down, and the heads up work kind of like lagged. And in retrospect, you could imagine that the project would have been a lot more successful, a lot faster, if you just spend that little bit of time, just orchestrating what you need from another person, what they need from you, and coming together to solve a problem. So when you see the value of that, it really tells you this is something that's worth growing. And today, I guess I'm pretty comfortable. It's something I enjoy doing too. It's like, sure, you have to make sure that these interactions are useful. They're either useful professionally or they're useful personally. Like, sure, you can have your social meetings, but professional meetings shouldn't develop into a social meeting. So that kind of productivity makes you feel accomplished at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like almost learning through experience of, okay, if I just put my head down and ignore the meetings, stuff's not going to get done. So viewing them first as a necessary evil and now as sort of part of the process, right? It's almost part of all right, to get from A to Z, we're going to have to talk to people. That's what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
exactly. Yeah. And also the realization that people are not out there to get you. Like every single person, more or less, that I've talked to, has some innate level of interest in like supporting what you're doing. And that feels great. That really changes your perspective on the company that you're working in.
Nice. Well, and I want to ask more. I'll ask in the next video more about the pros and cons of working at Google in particular. It sounds like you found productive colleagues, and so we'll dive more into that in the next clip. How's that sound?
Yeah. Sounds good for me.